And good morning. I'm Dr. Michelle Petacola of Second Chance Secrets and Secrets of Life and Death. Welcome to the Healer's Connection. We have an amazing guest this morning that I am not going to take any further time or waste any further time introducing her. She is awesome, and she's going to be talking about how to heal your money mindset so that you can invite and welcome more prosperity into your life. Reverend Andrea Scott Brown is the founder and creator of the Audacious Path Program, the M.O.N.E.Y course, and audaciouspath.com. Through Andrea's coaching, mentoring, and award-winning speaking, she helps entrepreneurs continue their audacious path. Andrea has been coaching for over 16 years. She's a certified empowerment coach, an infinite possibilities certified trainer, and an ordained metaphysical minister. I would like to welcome Andrea to the stage. Let me add you on. There you are. Good morning, Andrea. Thank you so much for joining me. The Healer's Connection is a location or a container for people to meet amazing healers and help them on their path, whether it's audacious or, as I call it, your great human adventure. And guess what? Money is one of those areas that often many of us need healing. I want to begin with asking Andrea, what's your story? What started you on your own audacious path? And by the way, for those of you who don't know French, audacious or audacio is the French word for bold or dare. And so that's what audacious means, is to be bold or to be daring, intrepid. So Andrea, tell us, how did you get started on your audacious path?
Well, I will say thank you first, Dr. Michelle. It's fabulous to be here. I'm thrilled to be here in this group and to be speaking with you today. I believe that we're on our own audacious path throughout our entire life. And I often start by telling my story that when I was first introduced to this idea of coaching, I thought, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is what I want to do. This is my life's work. I want to figure out how to do this. And it took me 10 years for me to allow myself to go to coaching school. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to make this investment for myself. I'm going to do this. And so I enrolled in coaching school. And at that time, I had an infant and a toddler. And I loved it. I was able to work from home. I was able to build my business. I left my corporate academic work and said, oh, this is my path. And my audacity of leaving my position at the time was kind of crazy to some. What I then did was start to build my business. And in the middle of the day, one day, my then husband came home. Unheard of, like not something that he does. So he came home and with a forlorn look on his face, he was laid off. Oh. And that was devastating to us and our family. You know, I was just starting this business and my very first reaction was, yay, now you get to do your thing. You get to build your own practice. He's an amazingly talented graphic designer and illustrator. So it was an opportunity for him to do something that he is great at and love to do. So he set off to do that. I was building my business, and fast forward a little bit, I realized we were $30,000 in debt.
Woo! Whoa, okay.
Yes. So I kind of pulled my head out of the sand, as they say, and said, okay, this isn't going to happen on my watch. Let's make a change here. And I went back to work full time, went back to academia, and within a year, we were completely out of debt except for our house. So that $30,000 in debt was gone. I was able to build a really strong financial foundation. What I didn't have was a really strong marriage at that time. So I ended up getting divorced. Well, we got divorced in 31 days. And 5 days later, I moved my kids from St. Louis, Missouri to South Carolina. And it
Wow.
was a big transition. Like, these are some of those big, bold, audacious steps that I've taken in my life because I felt driven, like, this is my path. This is where I'm supposed to go. This is what I'm supposed to do. And was it hard? Oh my goodness. Yes, it was extremely hard. And what I did though for myself and my kids, I bought a new house, set up shop, was doing the work thing, was there for 2 years. And then I got recruited to a new position. An old boss had recruited me to South Carolina, and then I was able to advance my career and do what she was doing here in Wisconsin. That's what brought me here. And that was about 11 years ago that I came here. And so I continued on my path in research administration, was doing that for another 8 years. And then I said, it's time for me to do this leap again. I left in 2018, October of 2018, and said, it's time for me to go back to this passion that I have around coaching and around helping mostly women. And I have built my business, and that's my path. That's my audacious path currently, and it's continuing to unfold every single day. And I look to see where I'm led.
That's amazing. What a story. And to break up with your husband, for him to come home and no longer have money, and after you'd already left your position. You seem to have an ability, however, to attract jobs, to attract money. And I was wondering, what is your own relationship with money? And how do you personally understand the struggles of others? Yeah, because some people, they have some real issues around money, and it's not that there isn't money out there, it's that there's something that's holding people back.
Absolutely. It's our internal struggle every single day with money that we get to learn about and understand. So my own relationship with money has been an interesting journey as well. As a kid, my parents really, my father had this amazing career in architecture, and he went out on his own, did this amazing business of, I think he said 19 architects under him. He and a partner had built this firm. And during a time where they had their largest contract completely removed, he continued paying everybody. And after a while, he had no money. Wow. And it was devastating. And he continued to be a solo architect the rest of his life. I think I'm not even sure if I was alive or if I was an infant, or I was really young, like young enough that I don't really remember this happening. So I knew him to be a solo architect, and he continued to work, but he always struggled with money. It was a really big problem in his life. My parents divorced when I was about 7, and my mother continued to kind of struggle and work with her advancing of her career. But initially, she made, or her take-home pay was more than, or her rent was more than half of her take-home pay.
Wow.
And, it was a treat when we got to get a bag of Doritos. This was like a highlight of my life, when we got to get a bag of Doritos and enjoy them. So I've had a varied background, and so growing up, my mother would never talk about money. She continued to advance in her career and did quite well. We moved around a lot, and she worked on government contracts. I learned a lot. I got to travel with her. I'm an only child, so it was the two of us kind of going around the country. And we were kind of buddies, and I learned a lot from her, but she would never balance her checkbook. She would hand me the checkbook to write out checks. So I learned how to do that. And I always wanted to balance it. And I always wanted to help my father with fixing his money problem. right? I would always give him advice, coming from a snot-nosed kid, it's not going to happen, right? But for me personally, I wanted to save, and throughout my childhood, I would save my birthday gifts or my holiday gifts and things like that and put it in the bank. And I remember my big purchase when I was in high school was a stereo set with the components and the glass case, and all. Like, that was like a thrill that I had to
So did you start working when you were pretty young? Did you babysit? Did you do certain things in terms of making money yourself?
I did a little bit of babysitting. I worked and kind of odd jobs. I helped a person with a flea market, and like would do that there was a giant flea market in our area, and I would do that. I kind of, yeah, I remember there were some times where I had that entrepreneurial spirit, and
very early on, didn't you? Yeah.
Very early on, there was a craze for cinnamon oil and I would soak toothpicks in cinnamon oil and sell them at school. They didn't like that very much, though.
The school didn't like that.
The school didn't like that, but the kids did. And
the kids liked it.
Yeah, I had lollipops, I would sell them, and like just little tidbits here and there. And yeah, so I've had a little bit of that entrepreneurial spirit my whole life, I think.
So you've been this coach of the Audacious Path, and you specialize in money mindset, or that I've heard you speak about that a number of times. So why do people struggle with money, do you think? Why is that an issue?
I think that we learn about money as the idea of money when we're really, really small. I mean, excuse me, when 0 to 7 is when our minds are like sponges. We absorb everything around us. There's no filter. And when we move forward in life, we take all of those experiences, we take all of those learnings that we've absorbed subconsciously with us. And as we grow older, we don't really know what is a filter that we've acquired or a belief that we have, or which is based on those years growing up. And that struggle or that idea of building a relationship with money can be tainted with whatever glasses that we had building, throughout our childhood.
So have you run into any kind of patterns in the people that you've worked with? Like, for example, maybe abandonment of a father and then your parents having to struggle, or maybe a situation where, you were told that you weren't good enough, or any sort of thing like that shows up routinely that people have. Maybe there's a contract, an unconscious contract that you as a child have made with your father, that you're never going to surpass them.
Absolutely. All of those things are components. And I think, I don't spend a whole lot of time unpacking that, because when we focus on what's bad or what doesn't work or what, that doesn't help us, that doesn't support us. And sometimes understanding like, oh, that was a trigger for me. When something shows up in today's life world, and all of a sudden there's that internal like ping, like, oh, like that was a jolt. Where did that come from? So understanding that sometimes helps us move forward and move through it and move beyond it. All of those scenarios that you just described are things that my clients have experienced. I think that it is, it's just really important to understand that we don't have to hold on to those, and it takes attention and specific steps in order to be able to move beyond something that's so ingrained, something that is a gut reaction or an immediate reaction to a situation rather than a response. So we have to learn how to respond rather than react.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's in our last meeting we had Grace Garitri talk about what is it called? Sorry, I'm blanking for a minute here. Wiggle my toes. Emotional intelligence, and that that the difference between react and respond. So that's important. But give me a little bit to go on how you might actually start to shift your mindset. I'm assuming that it's mindset that's holding us back, that it isn't that, there's a black cloud that's following us. It isn't that, although I suppose some people were, born into a situation which was challenging, but your mother and you, that was pretty challenging, right? And then your husband first losing his job and then leaving you, that's pretty challenging. Can you say anything about how, if the whole issue is mindset, how do you change your mindset?
So there are a lot of different ways to start that process. I often start with telling your own money story. So we uncover those things. We start talking about what is your own money story, and kind of developing some of the things that I described in my own life, and how that impacted me. What did I start to believe or think, or what did I learn about money? And it's about changing your relationship with money. So understanding in today's world how you interact with it, and starting to be curious about what alternatives are. So one of the biggest things that I talk about is being an observer in our life. And how do we become that observer? Because if we don't look at if we don't recognize what it is that we want to change, it won't change. So we have patterns that happen in our lives constantly that just happen because they've always been that way. That's one of the worst statements that when I was a director, and I had several people come to me and say, I asked, like, why have you done it this way? Or why are you doing it this way? And they said, the answer is, the worst answer that I could possibly imagine is, because we've always done it that way. And so let's counteract that. Let's be curious. Let's look at, how are we operating? What are we doing in our lives on a regular basis? How might we want to change that? And so we need to build up the patterns that help support and serve us, rather than the old patterns that are contradictory to our ultimate goal.
Mm-hmm. So when you talk about patterns, it could be actual spending habits, or not spending habits, because not spending, I think, is sometimes as much of a problem as spending. Right? Am I right?
Absolutely.
If you hold on to money too tight, and money is currency, it needs to flow. If you're holding on to it too tight, it may just, you save it for a rainy day. Rainy days happen, right?
Right. And, I look at money as a tool. Money is a tool. Money is two things. Money is a tool, something that we can use in our lives. I believe that we can have as much as we want to be able to do what it is that we want to do in life. That to have an abundant life, we need to have the resources to be able to fulfill on all the things that we want to do. And so we can attract and bring in that money to be able to serve us to do whatever it is that we want to do in our life. So money is a tool. It's also energy. Money is energy, and it's an exchange of energy. So when we vibrate at a level that supports what it is that we want to do, it seems to flow in. And when we hold on to it and it's stagnant, we talk about, it's like a pool of water. When a pool of water isn't moving, it's stagnant, it starts to smell really fast. It starts to be this cesspool of yuck. Let's just call it that.
Well,
and
yeah, and what I sense is that when you hold water back and there's actually a tension or desire to move, like it's current, it will break through. It'll break through dams. It'll break through bridges. It will, dams or any obstruction. Flow of water will push through. And I think that oftentimes money is like that. So if you're not spending it on your purpose, your passion, your audacious path, it may break out in other ways.
That's true. And it also can break out in disruptive ways. And to your point, we want to be able to direct, we want to be able to direct our focus on what supports us, what fuels us, what puts us on our audacious path. One of the things that I think is super important for us to really understand is what drives us, what is important to us, what is that. The audacious path to me is, I've got my courage sign behind me. So it's the courage to be able to move forward. It's the clarity to know exactly what it is that we want, how it is we want to be and do what we want to be, do, and have in our life, and then go out and create that for ourselves now, today. And with money, we're building a really strong financial foundation. That's my focus. I have my Audacious Path compass, which has 12 different areas of life in it. Just one of those is money. However, I often start with people around money, because when we build that financial foundation, we can do what I said earlier. We can have the money and resources we need to be able to do all the other things. And I look at money as mindset, which is super important because it drives everything. So we work on mindset throughout. And there's also the practical management of money, the practical way in which we tell our money what to do. And that's as important, I think, because it's about habits. It's about first the drive and the mindset, because that dictates what comes to us. And then what do we do with it? How do we make sure that we're moving on that right direction to get us to the financial goals and any other goal that we want to have?
It's really interesting what you're saying about money, and I was thinking that even people that have what a lot of us would consider a fabulous salary can be always running close to the edge, because
Absolutely.
maybe they are not living their passion, and so they need to reward themselves or treat themselves. I know that people who work in high paying jobs, but they work all the time, the money flows out because they want to somehow make themselves feel better, and they use the money to feel better rather than to use the money in strategic ways. Am I right?
You're absolutely right. One of the things that I talk about when people ask me, like, who's my ideal client, I say somebody who says, I make too much money to be this broke. And that's the kind of person that you're talking about. If the money's flowing in and it's also flowing out, even maybe sometimes more, although that's a myth, but we can talk about that later, that it's important to be in control of it, not hoard it, not hold so tight that every single, penny is, can only be used for a certain purpose or whatever. There's some flexibility, there's some flow, even with managing our money, but we know exactly what it's going to do for us. We know what we want it to do. We know when the next dollar comes in, it has a purpose. Those are the kinds of things that if we hold that lightly within our lives, within our world, then we're able to then make it happen. And it's amazing. The clients that I have worked with who start on this process looking specifically at their money, like through my money course, they start to grab this idea of, oh, I see the changes, and they start to happen when the initial focus starts and they're like really concentrating on it. It's amazing how quickly the changes happen. It's exponential. I love it. That's my favorite part.
That is so cool when you start to see that people are getting results and really changing. That's always very, very gratifying. So I want to open up, first of all, the chat for questions. So if you have questions for Andrea, please post them in the chat and we will work on them. Later, I'm going to open up and put us in a gallery view so that we can interact more directly. But right now, go ahead and put your questions in there. And if you have specific questions you would like to have answered. I have a question. How do you measure your current having level? What does that mean?
A having level is something that I acquired from a past coach. She talked about your having level as what are you allowing to have in your life? And I took it a step further, and I have a handout that I have for people that you can look at what are you currently allowing yourself to have in your life. And it looks at 3 different price tags for many different areas. And if you looked at it very closely, you might call it categories for a budget, but I won't say that out loud, right? You didn't hear that. Because we don't talk
you don't
about,
like budgets?
actually, I do. Some people don't. Yeah, I actually like a loose budget that allows us some flexibility in managing our money. But the having level handout that I have talks about what are you currently allowing in your life? What do you currently have? What is it that you need in your life? And they may or may not be the same. And then what is it that you want? What is your goal for each of these areas? And that may or may not be what you have now. So it's a way to look at a whole bunch of categories in your life and say, okay, what is it that I am allowing myself to have in my life? That is a great barometer. That's a great way to say, this is my current having level. When we start to see that having level increase is when you start to notice that your money mindset has also up leveled.
And there you have specific procedures that you work with your clients to lift their having level, certain actions they can take. I remember one of my coaches suggested that you go out to a high-end store and look around and imagine that you have several $1,000s and what would you buy, and just imagining it, because the mind is very powerful. So Ellen asks, what actions did you take to help the person who made too much money to be broke? Or should I say, what action did you have him take?
Well, my whole money course starts with money mindset, and then we start looking at what the next step is, opening the books. So it looks at where are we spending money? Let's look at the real numbers. Opening the books is, am I willing to actually look at where is my money currently sitting? How does it leave? How does it go? Then I talk about 3 different types of money. There's money that comes in, there's money that goes out, and there's money that you save and is in a location. That's it. So we look at those. We talk about and have to be willing to do that. And sometimes that's hard. Sometimes that's difficult to open the books. The next step is to know your numbers. So once we're willing to look at them, then we start to actually put together that budget and know what numbers you want to tell your money to do, and how do we make a balance and make choices. The next step is to evaluate everything. And that's where we really look at evaluating, is this where I want to spend my money? Is this where I want it to go? What are the choices that I have, even opening the doors even further about opportunities? And then the last module is called living on last year's income. And that means that we're not living paycheck to paycheck. We're not living on last month's income, but obviously we do that first. And the freedom that is created when you not only live on last year's income or last quarter's income, but last year's income, it just opens up so many doors, so many possibilities. And that may or may not be your goal, but I'll tell you, I've been there and I've done that, and it's amazing.
That's awesome. So we have another question, and it's, do you suggest keeping track of the money you spend on a daily basis to help you know where you are? I've always reacted to the word budget. Any thoughts? I'm sure all of us have issues about budgets, and we also hate to look at our numbers, and they just, well, not all of us. Maybe you, Andrea, have gotten past that, and you actually like to look at your numbers. I'm sure you must.
I do like looking at my numbers, and sometimes they're not exactly the way I want them to be. And so I have pings myself. And that's why I tread lightly with the word budget, because there is a visceral reaction that some people have around that word budget. I'll tell you that when I was married, I wanted to have a budget for my family, and we worked on a budget, and man, I was so proud of that budget. It was beautiful. It was this great piece of paper. I mean, I thought for hours about categories and what went in it and how we wanted to move things around. And it was so pretty, and I put it down on the desk, put it in a drawer, and it sat there. And it was great. And then the next month I'd pull it out and look at it. Oh, look, that's not where we spent our money. Okay, let's try this again. Let's do this. So we pull out the numbers, look at where we spent our money last month. And so that's called expense tracking, by the way. If you're actually looking if you're looking post spending, that's not budgeting, that's expense tracking.
Right. That's not budgeting.
No. And so I went through that process over and over, and it was not fun. I did not like a budget either, because it felt restrictive. It felt like it's putting me in a box, and I have and navigating that with a spouse or significant other can sometimes be difficult when you've got different goals or things that you want to do with the money. So that's why I tread lightly with budget. Do I suggest keeping track of it on a daily basis? Only if that's what you want to do. I suggest that weekly or bi-weekly is better, or not better, is
more reasonable, more doable.
Well, not necessarily. Actually, sometimes doing it daily is easier, because then you don't forget. It doesn't. And when you have the tools at your fingertips, if you've got an app, for example, where you're spending and you put it right into your budget, that can be the easiest sometimes. And when you fall into expense tracking, when you're doing it post the spending, then that's not helpful. But what I recommend is that you budget before the month begins, so that you know where you want your money to go, and then you track where that spending is going to make sure you have the money in that category to be able to spend it that month. Because most of us live on a monthly basis, it's just easier. So if you're looking at what you're spending, as long as it's within the category, you don't have let's say you allocate $200 to something. If you're spending $100 in there, you don't have to track it until later. But if you're spending $250 in that category, then you have to ask yourself where you're going to pull that money from in another category. And then we're getting into some of the
too much of the detail right now. And I'm guessing that you probably have different tools for different people depending on what works for them. Am I right? That some people want to get, really micromanage their money, and other people maybe have broader categories of, this is where, well, I'm not going to go into details, but am I right that you kind of adjust it to the people, or maybe you just attract the people who are your right clients and go with what works with you?
Well, people can, within the systems that I have created and suggested within my money course, for example, they can be tailor-made for a person and how they want to use them. And so a person may want to track every day, their expenses. A person may want to do it on a bi-weekly basis. Maybe they want to do it whatever period of time they get paid. And so they know that is the money comes in and the money's going out. You have it allocated to where you want it to go, et cetera. I have some really great tools that I personally use and recommend that help to manage money and track kind of where are you moving towards your goals and that kind of thing. And we could talk about that another time if you'd like. But.
Yeah. So we have another interesting question from Laura. She says, how does your Reverend training help you how did it help you with your career and your clients' money work?
So I am an ordained metaphysical minister. My story, that's another Audacious Path story, I suppose. I have been interested in studying spirituality and relationships with higher power for a very long time. And I actually did all of the bookwork and the requirements necessary for my current designation many years ago. And it took me 9 years to actually sign on the dotted line to take on the title. And so there seems to be this gap in time where I start to assimilate and move into this next phase of my life. So that was a couple of years ago. My degrees are up here. I am proud of them. And it's not a direct relationship necessarily to the money work, although what I find is that I did the work and I became an ordained metaphysical minister because it was important to me in my own spiritual growth. And I think that my understanding of universal principles helped me in my coaching and in my money work. So it speaks to how I operate in the world, and it also gives me fuel and education around how it is that I teach. So
nice question. Nice question. So I'm going to be opening up. We're galloping through the time. It's wonderful. I wanted to ask if you had any kind of free offer or an event coming up if people wanted to find out more about the work that you do before I open this up. Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. A couple of things. Actually, I'm gonna, let's see. I'll share my screen, a couple of things that you can look at. This is my website, audaciouspath.com. And I talked before about the Audacious Path Compass, and this is the compass. There is an opportunity for you to go through a training that I have around this. So it gives you kind of an insight of how I work and some of the work that I do. The finances piece is what we've been talking about today mostly, but that's a great resource. So if you go to audaciouspath.com, this is where that is. If you want to know more about the money course, that's here. But I also want to share that I'll be speaking doing a master class next Thursday. Is that right? It's the 30th. Wednesday. It's Wednesday. Mm-hmm. At 3 p.m. Central. And it's on the law of resonance. And it's actually, I'm doing a collaboration with somebody else. So I'm going to be talking more about money mindset and a little bit more about kind of the things we talked about today and about the money course itself. So if you'd like to learn more.
And is that free? Is that masterclass free?
It is.
Awesome. So is there a link for people to register for it? Can you throw that in the chat?
I will do that. It is audaciouspath.com/masterclass. Really easy.
Awesome.
There you go.
That's fabulous. Okay. So those are two really great offers. I did do the Audacious Path thing that you offered for free. Compass? And I listened to the audio. I thought it was brilliant. I love your compass. I thought that was really great, and the visual of creating the points on the compass to see where you are at each part in your life, and understanding that there's more than just money to your life. So that's really great. So I'm going to show, if you do not want to be seen, make sure to turn off your video, because I'm going to go into gallery view so I can see all of you, and want to invite you, if any of you want to speak to Andrea, as opposed to put your questions in the chat, this is your opportunity. Okay, so look at all you wonderful, lovely people who showed up today. Does anybody want to engage with Andrea at this point? And if so, unmute yourself and speak up.
I do.
Yes, Michelle.
So a few years ago, I lost a lot of money, and I still feel that I have trauma, because I feel that if I didn't have that money, I wouldn't lost it in the first place. So I noticed that nowadays when I make money, I will lose it very quickly. So how do I release myself from this financial trauma?
That's a great question. I don't know if I could answer it in 2 minutes, but I can say that, what we talked about before, start to be curious about what that's bringing up in you when you start to think about it. And it's about changing your relationship with money. So bring in opportunities where you can, when you have any money that comes in, thank it. Bless it for being in your life, and thank you for doing the job that you want it to do for you. So you're talking about a trauma that's super deep. Like this happened to you, and it was a difficult time for you to go through, and understanding that there is a grief, there's a release, an opportunity for healing that. We're talking about the healing connection, right? We're talking about how do we manage that type of situation. So give yourself some grace, and just be gentle with yourself around money, and give yourself just little opportunities for being thankful, being grateful, being appreciative of what it is allowing you to do in your life. So for example, you live somewhere, you might pay rent, or you might pay a mortgage. It doesn't matter, but bless the opportunity to spend your money on whatever it is. It's giving you a roof over your head. It's allowing you to eat food. It's allowing you to enjoy electricity, or bless those things, and be grateful. Like jump up and down, do a little dance about the fact that you get to do this. You get to have these wonderful things because of this money exchange. That's what allows you to do it. And when you start to put more and more energy around the positive energy around money, I think that you'll start to see it shift.
So there actually is a post by Deborah in the chat that says, try Deepak Chopra's approximate 3-week abundance practice. So the other thing I wanted to mention was, oftentimes when a traumatic thing happens like that, it scares your body like crazy. Oh my gosh, how am I going to survive? But there might also be an association of shame that you failed. And part of the mindset work is to change your story around what happened, to see it as a learning rather than a shameful failure. And remember, what was it? Thomas Edison, wasn't he the one who, it took him many, many times until he finally figured out how to make a light bulb. And when he was asked, didn't he get discouraged? He said something like, well, that was just, the 1001 way in which not to make a light bulb. So a lot of it has to do with not the event itself, but the interpretation or the message we apply to that experience. And if you can start to shift that story, you can take away some of the shame and fear around it. Because I believe that if you look at the biographies of any major self-made successful businessmen or women, you'll find that there was a lot of failure there, because that's the only way. Failure is really mistake, which is making a mistake. Or as somebody else said, there's no failure, there's only practice and learning. Anybody else have a question? Ellen, yes, go ahead.
You had talked about make a budget and then tracking expenses. What I have found is tracking expenses is incredibly tedious to know where you are against your budget. So my question to you is there anything that is available that is not so tedious? And what I mean by that is, my husband used to track the budget and the expenses, and he would spend hours matching the expenses to his budget categories to see where he's at. And I don't have that kind of time. So since he's not doing it anymore, I basically am not tracking my expenses against the budget until it comes to the end of the year and I put the big picture together. And of course, then it's too late.
So there are a lot of ways to do that if you're interested in doing it electronically. There are tools to be able to import information from your bank, for example, and you set your budget and it'll look at how much money you have left in each category. So there's a lot of different types of tools. It depends on what you're comfortable with. And if you want to do it on paper, or if you want to do it on an Excel, or if you want to do it in an app or like another program.
So that's a really good idea. I've been using Quicken for years, and I can easily identify what are the expenditures for each month because it creates a report for you. So you can see exactly where you spent your money. And if you want to do categories, I have way too many categories because I'm kind of tracking all sorts of things, but it's really easy to see, oh, how much am I spending on groceries? Probably one of our biggest expenses is groceries because we eat really well.
And it's variable, right? That's something that is dependent upon each individual month. And so my favorite tool is YNAB. You need a budget. YNAB is the name of the app. And I have a link somewhere that can get you certain dollars off if you'd like to look in that. But they have a free trial that's, I think, 34 days long to check it out. And so if you're interested in that, let me know and I can find you that link to get some money off.
Okay, so have you put contact information in the chat? And let me see, Deborah also said, it can even come from our parents struggling and are feeling guilty that we are the next generation that can thrive and become successful. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you for really sharing your thoughts in the chat. Appreciate that. So yeah, go ahead. If you want people to contact you, put your contact information in. Melissa says, not everyone is a tracker. You need to find what works for you. I worked with this in both finance and losing weight. It just made a list on what went in and out. Just making a list on what went in and out. Melissa, great comment. There you are, Melissa. Yeah, what you have to find out what works for you and what you have in terms of time. And I loved what Andrea said at the very beginning about being curious about what are your money stories, writing a list of all the major experiences that you had. Why? Not so much to dwell on them, but to recognize when they show up and say, oh, that's just my money story coming in. How interesting, rather than being held back by that. Thank you for the YNAB connection. And by the way, if you see the little 3 dots next to in the bottom of the chat and click on that, you can save the chat. So if you don't want to go ahead and copy these links now, you can do that. Andrea, do you have anything more that you want to share with the group today? Because I'm going to start doing the closing soon, but this was just an amazing presentation. A lot of great information, some really direct answers. I really appreciate your knowledge, expertise, and your approach.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me. It's been great to be here. I will just point you back to audaciouspath.com. And if you go all the way down to the bottom, there's a links page that can give you some other freebies that I have and other resources. So I would love for you to come to the talk on Wednesday, and I hope to see you again soon.
That's awesome. So in closing, I would love any of you to post takeaways that you're getting from today's event in the chat. Oh, Deborah says, one general rule that has worked for me so far, getting out of debt, seeing anything that generates interest from money you owe as lethal. I'm not quite sure I understand that. Get rid of any high debt as soon as possible with as little damage to your credit score as possible. Well, those are, go on.
Yeah, I understand what she's saying. And, you know, if you're looking at, if you're paying interest on anything, it's money that you don't have to spend when you pay for it in full. So I am a big proponent of living debt-free. I love that. I have a little bit left on my house, but I have lived debt-free other than my house for many years. I guess 12, 13 years, something like that. 12, 14 years, something like that.
That's amazing.
And
yes,
it is incredible.
Yeah, you have to understand, you know, what sometimes a loan that's a real low interest rate may actually be an asset. So you might keep that in mind. If you have like a really low interest rate on your house and the interest rates have gone up, which they haven't right now, they haven't gone up in ages, but they could. And if they did, then it becomes an asset, you know, and then you don't want to pay it off right away because you're actually making money in a certain way.
One thing that we haven't talked about was net worth today, but that's a whole other training that I have around net worth and how that one tool can help guide you moving forward if we focus on that.
Awesome, awesome. So I wanted to, in closing, to remind you that the Healers Connection meets twice a month on the second Tuesday of the month at 5 p.m. Pacific Daylight Saving Time or Standard Time, wherever we are, and on the fourth Friday of the month at 9 o'clock in the morning. So some of those times are going to work for you. Come next meeting, which is on a Tuesday, it's going to be the second Tuesday. I have a woman coming in who talks about organizing your home and your surrounding. And she's a feng shui master. So she's going to give you the real etheric aspects of how you arrange things and how you want to get rid of clutter. And actually, as you get rid of clutter, you create space for more things to come in. And I'm thinking that there's an analogy here for money. If you know you're holding your money too closely, you may not create space for more money to flow in. And of course, you have to raise your have level in order to create more space as well. So I hope you come back. I believe it's, where's my calendar? I have a bunch of them. July 13th. Scott Claire is going to be sharing. She's a really interesting presenter and fabulous speaker. So do come back. Make sure if you are already registered with the Healers Connection, you will get an email reminding you of the event, probably a day before the event. And you can always review these trainings at the Healers Connection. There's a little button there, if you scroll down, that will take you to the replays. And I will have this replay up if you want to look at some of the advice or some of the things that Andrea shared with us today. If there are any final comments from anybody, let's see. Melissa says, very interesting. Deborah says, debt to income ratio and your credit score in the financial world equals freedom to make good financial choices. Thank you, Deborah. And Barbara said, this has been a really insightful and helpful. Melissa said, true. It has been a pleasure to have all of you. Any final comments or questions? Otherwise, have an awesome, audacious day and be brilliant. And bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.